Welcome to the American Hardcore Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Blush. This podcast is an ongoing conversation with the great musicians and non-musicians of the American hardcore punk scene. Back in 1980, I went off to college in Washington, D.C., where I stumbled upon this incredible new punk energy with bands like the Bad Brains and Minor Threat. I dove headfirst into it. I became the kid concert promoter. I booked all the DC bands. I booked Minor Threat and PIL. I booked Minor Threat and Trouble Funk. I booked all the great bands as they came through town: Black Flag, Circle Jerks, Dead Kennedys. Half these bands crashed on my couch. So it was a real life-changing experience. And years later, what I came to learn is that I, in fact, have two sets of values. I have those values instilled by my family, and I have that fierce DIY ethic that I got from the hardcore punk scene. And that, in a nutshell, is how I started the American Hardcore book, then the American Hardcore film, and now the American Hardcore podcast. So thank you for checking us out. Everyone talks about what's your favorite hardcore band. And if you say Minor Threat, Misfits, Agnostic Front, Cro-Mags, there's no correct answer. But if you ask me, the band that always worked for me was Black Flag. In fact, some people would say that I have a kind of unhealthy obsession with this band, with all their records. I mean, I have like 15 of them here of various setups and lineups. There were four singers in the history of Black Flag. There was Keith Morris, later the singer of the Circle Jerks, who sang on their first single. There was Ron Reyes, who appeared in the Decline of Western Civilization film. There was Des Cadena, who sang on the Louie Louie single and the Six Pack single. And then there was Henry Rollins, who joined the band at age 19 and played on every single record. Probably the most famous of those records is Black Flag Damage, their first album. And I bring this up because 39 years ago this week was the release of this album. And, you know, it's such a classic. Anyone could talk to you about Rise Above, Gimme, 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 Six Pack, you know, what incredible piece of vinyl. But what people often talk about is the cover itself. And it is a photo by EDWARD Colver of Henry Rollins punching a pane of glass. There was no Photoshop, no fake blood. This is how they did it. Henry Rollins punching a pane of glass. Damaged, indeed. And the artist of this was photographer EDWARD Colver, who is our guest this week. I often refer to him as the Bob Gruen of LA Punk, because for the better part of a 10-year period, he shot every single band and show in the scene. So I want to welcome you to the American Hardcore Podcast, and here's my conversation with EDWARD Colver. Almost as important as the music of the bands is the images that have been captured by the photographers of the bands and of the scene itself. And if you think of many of the great punk and hardcore bands, Black Flag, Dead Kennedys, Circle Jerks, TSOL, Social Distortion, they all have one thing in common, and it's the iconic photos of EDWARD Colver. EDWARD Colver is still relevant. He's doing incredible photos and work to this day. So I just want to say welcome, EDWARD Colver, to the American Hardcore Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Steve. I appreciate your interest.
Great. Yeah, big fan of your work, as you know. We've worked together. There's so much to talk about, knowing your history. And we'll get back to talking about you growing up in the 60s and early 70s in Los Angeles and seeing all this incredible music.
To the extent that I did grow up.
Yeah. Well, growing up is a term in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know, you kind of get known for this photography of the punk rock scene in LA as it develops over like 10 years plus. What was your interest in it? Why was it really important for you to document it? And what were you discovering about yourself and through all this process too?
Well, it was kind of happenstance that I went to a show and stuff and got a hold of a cheap 35 millimeter camera at the same time. And when I saw shows like at the Hong Kong Cafe, I was just like hooked. I was like, this is amazing. And there was all these, people, which was basically a handful, like half the punks in LA at that time in like 78, like half of them were in the bands. And, there wasn't a lot of people there, but I started going and I saw amazing bands. Some of them never recorded anything, nobody ever hear them.
So these are people, just to talk about it in a broader terms, these are people like on the edge of society. I mean, so much so that they're not like, they don't have the same goals as the typical rock star. Talk about that radical spirit that you're picking up in these, who became all these people kind of became your friends, but talk about like that radical spirit that you tapped into, they all share, things like that.
Well, there was a lot of energy and creativity going on, and it was a whole mishmash of misfits. I always kind of said that there's like everything from geniuses to drunken morons in the punk scene. It was a real mishmash of stuff, kind of, which made for interesting interactions.
Yeah, I always found like it was amazing who I would become friends with because of this music scene. So people from all different stratas, all different styles, all different ways of life, all kind of coming together under this umbrella of radicalism, really,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What were you finding in these photos? Like, sometimes you'll sit there and describe your photos to me, and I'm just kind of like, what, you're not going to get that when you take a picture of Fleetwood Mac, for instance, right? So kind of talk about like what the spark is, what the energy. Yes, I know I'm speaking to LA here, but
they were great in the early years.
Yeah, yes, they were. But kind of talk about that a little bit, like how, like, there's such this incredible testosterone and nihilism, yet style, yet smart statements. I find that is like the real irony of punk rock, is that everyone, it's like a stupid look, but a very smart face, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah, so you have to be kind of smart to be around this, I guess is what I'm saying, right?
Around the punk scene?
Yeah, well, in you could find the smart and even the people who necessarily you would say maybe were violent or troublemakers. They were all kind of smart enough to be there in the first place.
I guess right? So, yeah.
Yeah. Do you see a semblance of the anti-establishment spirit today? I mean, we see a lot of activism and all that. And do you see a connection to punk rock?
Yeah, not so much in the music nowadays. It's more art and political and, activism and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Of course, I haven't listened to punk rock for years, basically.
Mm-hmm. What impresses you about the radicalism that we sometimes see today? I mean, it's obviously like it's not all, you keep active and you talk to people, and what impresses you about it?
There's more people being exposed to stuff and more people kind of joining to make things improve, I think. I grew up in the 60s and all the anti-war stuff and all that kind of stuff. And, there was, the punks are always spouting anarchy. A lot of the, like the Weather Underground, the Black Panthers, the White Panthers, SLA, those people were out doing stuff, and the punks kind of always talk about it a lot, but it's kind of a different thing, sort of. So they sort of relate. And what I got to mention is like when the punks say, oh, fucking hippies, kill the hippies. And it's like, those aren't hippies. The hippies are long gone. Those are long-haired rednecks. They're not hippies. Just because they have long hair does not make you a hippie. And those people are railing against and calling hippies, they're long-haired rednecks. Get it straight.
What was the difference and similarities between these two undergrounds of the 60s and the 70s?
Well, there was like radical changes going on all stratas of society and politics and stuff. You know, both incidences, they're very similar in a lot of ways, I think.
Mm-hmm. What do you look for in a photo? Like, in other words, what are you if there's like something that you could boil it down to, what would you say that you're looking for?
Quality. um, I studied all forms of manual arts and, you know, woodworking and painting and sculpture and ceramics and printmaking and, you know, all kinds of stuff. And through my, you know, childhood love of art and my lifelong pursuit of it, that I know, you know, composition and balance and stuff. And a lot of people just point and shoot. They never compose a picture and they don't time it to get the drama and things like that. You know, if I was getting knocked sideways in a pit, I was still trying to compose a picture, not just take it. You know, just taking a picture to me, it ain't shit.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the radicalism of the 60s and the radicalism of the 70s. You're talking about how they're very different, but yet they are unmistakably connected. So how did you, someone who had experienced them both?
Well, like in the 60s, there was all kinds of experimental avant-garde kind of bands, you know, trying a lot of stuff. And then in the 70s, it just became a bunch of arena rock garbage. And then the punk scene kind of hit. There was transitional, you know, stuff going on all the time, like the Stooges and Patti Smith and the MC5 and Jack Ruby and the punks and all that stuff was going on, but it was pretty minimal. And
so who were who were the punk rockers, so to speak, of the 60s?
Of the 60s?
Like who portended it? Who, you know, was it, you know,
I mean, Attitude?
Jim Morrison, I don't know. Jim Morrison playing on Sunset Strip.
In ways, yeah. I don't know. I think Iggy, you know, for damn sure. You know, people talk about who started punk rock, and in my opinion, it's flat out Iggy. Mm-hmm. You
know. Talk about hardcore and punk rock is not, the relevance of it is not really going away. It doesn't see, it's a multi-generational thing now. That talk about the good and the bad of being a punk photographer. I mean, a lot of your stuff get like, even if you talk to like a Bob Gruen, who I would compare you to in many ways for doing for LA punk what he was doing for New York rock. He, you know, his issue is always about like not getting the credit, not getting the you know, some kind of corporate thing kind of comes in and usurps it and uses it and changes it. And I know you've had a little taste of that. So it's kind of like it's like a blessing and a curse at the same time, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say, what I was going to say is like, you know, I've had so many of my photos just ripped off and used, and like the Wasted Youth flip photo, the Black Flag Damage cover, all my Ross Williams stuff. They're everywhere. And I still haven't been on a computer. And when my wife, Karen, got me an iPhone about 9 years ago, I got onto so-so media is what I call it. And my friend had set up a Facebook page for me. And honestly, every time I logged on, I'd see some of my photos with no credit. They'd gone all over the world and I had no idea. I was just kind of like, what? It was like, wow, pretty amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's a cross to bear. You know, it's like you know, sometimes, you know, you write a book and then you see every one of your riffs in all of these other books and all this other films and all this, and people telling you things that were like in my book. So I definitely relate to that.
You know, like it used to annoy the hell out of me, sort of like when the Wasted Youth flip photo got ripped off and used on something, which is actually the skateboarder punk Chuck Burke jumping off stage during the Adolescence set at Perkins Palace, July 4th, 1981. And DOA and the Stiff Little Fingers were on the bill. But it was really annoying. And then it became, after a while, it's like, you know what? It just iconizes the photo that much more. And eventually, there's a lot of people that know it's my photo, but eventually even more will gradually know that, like, I took that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an incredible struggle to, because the forces of industry are so much stronger, and a lot of lazy people too, so
Yeah.
it's like a hard one. Who is, you talked about it, you may have already answered this question in terms of talking about the flip photo, as you refer to it with Chuck Burke. What do you think are your iconic photos?
Ooh, well, I don't know. That
I mean,
one.
Black Flag Damaged is certainly like kind of, that's imprinted in almost everybody's brain in this
Oh,
scene.
thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, a friend of mine sent me a picture that's in some rock album book. I never heard about it at all, but it's in that. And well, I don't know, the TSOL EP cover that I did the photo and the artwork on is pretty iconic.
Yes, for sure. Because
And,
like how much you're doing with black and white is also obviously that's a black and white album cover, but
yeah.
talk about that, the chiaroscuro and all that kind of stuff of that's involved with this punk rock scene of black leather and whatnot. You didn't really want color photos of dead Kennedys or something, let's say.
I certainly didn't. I like black and white. To me, it's it renders things more. I don't know. It gets rid of distractions. Somebody says, "Well, what about the pink hair?" And I say, "Oh, that's irrelevant in my opinion. It's just like had nothing to do with anything. That's gone in a black and white picture, but it's like something else that's stronger shows through or more important."
Mm-hmm.
I started going out to shows shooting in late '78, and I stopped in early '84 when I got a studio. But I was out on the average of 5 nights a week, so I figured during those 5 years I went to 1,000 punk shows, which just amazes me. It's like the effort and driving and doing all that and shooting film and developing it, and it was crazy. And by the end of 1983, I had my pictures used on 80 LA punk rock records.
Mm-hmm.
There was a single of Toxic Shock put out that says, "Surprise, no photos by Ed Culver" on the back of it. I'm still laughing. The guy thought I'd be mad at him. But I did like a lot of these bands, like their first record, the TSOL, China White, Circle Jerks, Wasted Youth, Bad Religion. Well, that was their second album. RF7, Legal Weapon, 45 Grave. I did a lot of stuff.
So what is it that makes a cover art photo, an album cover photo? Is it the composition, like we were talking about earlier? What is the, because it's not just you just threw a photo out there. There's a certain thing that's being captured, and it's a certain graphic element that's different than that, beyond the 35 millimeter.
Yeah, well, you're dealing with a square format unless you use it full frame and do something else with a negative space. But like a lot of I did the Channel 3 Fear of Life album, which was a photo that was left over from Black Flag's Damage that I did. I also did the Louie Louie single with Dez, but I did these 2 photos, a spray can and spray paint, and a backward gun photo, which was a self-portrait for Damage, and they didn't get used, and I gave them to Channel 3 when they wanted me to do their cover. I said, "Well, what are you calling it?" And they said, "Fear of Life." I said, "I've already got your cover." And they were like, "Oh, what?" And I just, the graphic layout on that record just upset me so bad, because it's a really strong photo. And Channel 3, Channel 3, Channel 3. And then over in the other negative space, it says Fear of Life. And it's like, oh, it distracted so much from the power of that photo. It could have said Channel 3 for your life up in the corner, nice and small, and not purple. You know, personally, I like red, black, and white if you're going to involve a color. And red, black, and white. When it was reproduced in California hardcore, the history of punk and new wave in California in '83, they reproduced it in red, black, and white, and it looked 10 times better than that purple. You know, it's weird.
Well, yeah, those are the colors of hardcore, right?
Well, it comes from Russian constructivist artists and stuff like that, but it's a really great basic, you know, graphic design for minimal colors.
What is your favorite of the album covers?
Oh, I don't know. I like a lot of them. You know, 45 Grave, Sleep and Safety, and Damaged, and the China White album cover with actually a real murder scene on the cover. I was driving by and stopped and shot one frame out of my car window with the engine running and nailed that. And I don't know, I like the Louie cover, the TSOL one, the Group Sex one. You know, it's like some of these, they still use them. Like TSOL is still using that. Group Sex is still using the image I created. You know, it hasn't become dated. It's still, you know, like that TSOL with the ... that I did. That was like vinyl price. Excuse me. That was vinyl typeset that I stuck onto the artwork that I did, and I still see that used as a logo. They've probably got about 20 different logos, but that one's still around as a logo, even if it's taken off the album.
Yep. Well, it's just incredible work. I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but kind of tell us about this new project you're working on, this new book, really kind of capturing some of the, capturing the scene of hardcore in that it's more than, of punk rock in that it's more than one or two or three bands. You're really getting deep into the culture, and you really get a feel for how deep the punk culture was in places like Los Angeles.
Well, you know, I'm scanning a lot of my old negative. I have thousands and thousands of photographs that nobody's ever seen that I shot. Dog directly. I have thousands of photographs of that era that I shot all pre-84 that nobody's seen. No, they even know I have, or bands that they don't know I photographed. And, you know, I would shoot like all these bands that I could get them together. I'd shoot photos of them and stuff, and those went into a file, and nobody ever needed the photos, and so nobody's ever seen them. Kind of, you know, I used to get, you know, Touch and Go would hit me up for pictures or something. I'd mail them across the country, and, you know, and different fanzines would use them, and a lot of these bands I photographed, and I thought they were all significant. You know, some were well known, and others nobody ever heard about. You know, and I was there and photographed it. And so in the new book, I want to kind of feature everybody, you know, and get comments from my friends about stuff and their memories. And, you know, like I would like to do something like, you know, maybe, you know, 25 Dead Kennedy photos. I've got a lot of stuff nobody's ever seen. And then, you know, and a whole bunch of different things like that, where I use quite a few of one band, but then there's, you know, the Demented and, you know, Anti and these other bands that are in there. There'll be some stuff in there too of them, not just the, you know, people think I did the Circle Jerks and TSOL and the Kennedys and Black Flag kind of stuff. And it's like, I shot everybody, you know, it was all part
and you still do, you know, that's what thing that really is kind of like the fierce, you know, there's kind of a fearless side to people who came out of this subculture, I feel, or the ones who got it right. And it's just like, you never give up, you keep doing it, you keep to your ethic, and it's pretty fierce. It's a pretty impressive subculture that we participated in and what it inspired.
Yeah, it was. I kind of liken it to, like, you know, it was underground back then. It's, you know, it's not now, but it was like being part of the Beat Generation or the real early hippie movement, you know, all the anti-war stuff and things like that. You know, the peace sign originally meant ban the bomb, is what it means.
Is that true? Wow.
Yeah. You know,
you were around for all that. It's incredible. And you have been through all these elements of American subculture.
Yeah.
It's pretty...
you know what? I almost like to say, we're talking about some of the violence and nihilism and fatalism or whatever, that is like the last, 3-4 generations grew up with the threat of dying with the bomb. And everybody, you're going to get under your desk and put your head between your legs, and then they say, "Queen, kiss your sweet ass goodbye." We all thought like we could be blowing off the planet tomorrow or within 3 minutes. That fucked up everybody for generations. They thought like, well, why live for tomorrow? Who cares about the ecology? We're all going to die. And it doesn't matter. And it got this self-centered kind of nihilistic, just craziness inspired in a lot of people. It's their upbringing and breeding. And it's like, I haven't really heard anybody talk about it per se, but that just fucked up generations, the bomb,
Yeah, I from my earliest memory is that we are not going to live a full life.
Yeah.
That
not so much now, but it's kind of even coming back,
So I want to thank you so much for coming on here. One thing I like to do to finish this is I do like a little lightning round where I kind of mention a name and just anything that kind of comes off the top of your head. Let me just try this. Jello Biafra.
Talented genius.
Henry Rollins.
He's still relevant.
Jack Grisham.
Good friend for many years and always entertaining.
Mike Ness.
He's got amazing talent that's still going.
Keith Morris.
Good friend and still doing viable stuff.
Tony Reflex.
Yeah, he's in the neighboring city, still a good friend. He's gone through, he's a great guy, a good friend.
And EDWARD Colver.
Oh, that guy. I don't know what to say to that.
Well, we won't put you on the spot after
You already did.
After we just did put you on the spot, yes. So Edward, thank you so much for coming. Thanks for coming and thank you to everyone for watching the American Hardcore Podcast. So we'll see you next time.